welcome to Beauty in the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, and consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, this is a very exciting episode because it's Dr. Robert Singer of La Jolla, California. He's a plastic surgeon, and this is actually his second appearance on Beauty in the Biz. And he's the first one I've had on twice because he has such darn good intel. So Dr. Singer's been in practice since 1976. And for those of you who are tough with the math, that's 46 years in practice. And he's an internationally recognized plastic surgeon and respected by peers and patients alike. Now, he's held positions on the board of several distinguished plastic surgery organizations, most notably the Aesthetic Society for Plastic Surgeons. Now, since a lot of surgeons I'm close to, we talk, and lately, the last couple of years, we used to talk about how to get more patients, how to grow your practice. And lately, the conversation seems to be turning to how do I walk away from this profitably, or how do I exit, or what are my options? So I asked Dr. Singer about his exit strategies because he knows everything about everything. And he agreed to come on Beauty in the Biz and share the various options available to you, as well as how he personally is handling it. So Dr. Singer, thank you so much for being on Beauty in the Biz. It's a pleasure to have you back again.
Thanks, Catherine. And it's a pleasure to work with you. Working in the past with you has been very productive. I would urge all plastic surgeons or anybody in practice really to avail themselves of the expertise of patient and practice consultants because most of us don't know what we don't know. And I think that the consultants bring a lot to the table. So without further ado, and thank you for that introduction, I'm going to share my screen and bring up.
So if you're listening to this on the podcast, after the podcast, I have a video session on a Saturday. So if you're listening to the podcast and you want to see the screens, look for my next email where I'll be talking about our video, and then you can see the Dr. Singer slides. So, and Dr. Singer, take it away.
For those who are unaware of who I am, and it's kind of irrelevant, but these are the things that I've done. So I've had a lot of experience in plastic surgery and also fortunately in business. And we're going to talk about what's my exit strategy. So no matter where you are in your practice, whether you're starting and you're building a practice, you need to think about the exit. Too many people wait too long to try to figure that out, and then their options are limited. So before you go riding off into the sunset, you need to think about what are your future plans, what are your goals? If you're going to go to something, you want to make sure that you're going to go to the right things and you've identified that. So decide what your objectives are. Do you want to stay involved in the practice or in plastic surgery in some way? Do you want to just extend your exit ramp until you gracefully decide you want to stop? Do you have other business ventures that you think that you want to do, either in conjunction with practice or alone? And do the things you always wanted to do. Remember, think about that bucket list that you haven't been able to do. Do you want to teach? Do you want to volunteer locally, nationally, internationally? And my family and I have been able to do some of that. Do you want to travel? To learn or to teach. You just want to enjoy life. But think about that, and that'll help you make your decisions. Don't wait to start planning. You want to start now. It's not too early to start planning, no matter what level you are in your practice. So you have your vision, but you need a strategy. You need to prepare, have a process, execute, evolve in the result, and then you have the transition. It just doesn't happen overnight. You need to create a timeline for your goals, and you'll be a huge step closer to achieving them. But you have to think, do you have enough to retire? You may want to retire. Can you retire and live the life that you want to live? You don't want to be in this situation. I've just done the math, and based on my calculations, I can retire about 5 years after I die. I've seen too many people in different businesses in that situation. Remember that a goal without a plan is just a wish. You need a plan. So you've got a facility, you may have an OR, you may have a building. You think, okay, am I going to put it up for sale? Or what am I going to do? You need consultants. You can't do this by yourself. You need someone as an exit strategy consultant. Somebody can evaluate the practice, give you an idea of what it's worth, what reality is. You need an attorney to go over all the forms, and whatever arrangement you make, they need to finalize it, because you'd be surprised what are in some of these exit clauses. And you need a financial consultant, essentially a tax consultant, to tell you, okay, here's how you can maximize the benefit. Here's what you're in for. Here are the loopholes. Here are the problems. So an exit consultant you need to define the scope of his or her services. Are they going to provide a promotional package to get it out, to sell it? Are they going to vet and interview individuals coming in to negotiate with potential interested parties, whether you bring in someone, whether you sell it, whether you close the door? What are you going to do? You need a non-disclosure and non-compete agreements if you're bringing in additional people. You need a letter of intent, a buy-sell agreement, a consulting agreement, a physician employment agreement. You may not need all of these depending on which options you take, but these are the scope of services that they can and should provide. Remember that the person as an exit strategy in some ways may have a little conflict of interest because they're interested in selling and getting their fees. So you may want to have an independent person do the valuation of the practice. On the other hand, if you find an ethical, solid person for an exit strategy, they can do both. Patient notification letter if you're ceasing practice or you're transitioning. And staff termination and transition letter if they're going to be involved in a new entity, whether you're involved in it or not. So these are the things that they can provide. Now, consultant fees depend on the scope of services, evaluation, the plan. Are they going to handle the total transition? Or are they just going to consult for you and they're going to promote it? There's variations. They may do it hourly, maybe a retainer up front, and maybe a one-time all-inclusive, or a commission percentage on the total sale, if it's a sale or the transition.
Is there one that's more popular than another with the surgeons that you've noticed?
I think it depends on the surgeon. Every surgeon has a little different approach and what they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. I arranged it so there was a retainer fee. They produced a video of the office, talked about it, put it out there. We had a fair number of individuals who responded. They were very good. And then they took a percentage of the final amount. And that worked fine for me. Mm-hmm. So you need a business evaluation. What is it worth? If you wait until the end, you may be shortchanging yourself. But that encompasses a lot of different things, because what you think it may be worth may change, and it changes with different economies. So the fair market value, there's the price you want, and then there's the reality of the value. And there's no absolute fair sales price. You have to look at tangible asset valuation. You know, what are the instruments you have? What are the machines you have? Do you own the facility? Do you own the OR? Do you own the equipment in there? Or are you just leasing it? Are you just renting the facility? Those are the solid asset valuations. And then the intangible assets like goodwill. And let me tell you, that's very intangible. Goodwill changes a lot. It means different things. Goodwill doesn't carry the same weight that it used to. And a lot of your patients, if you're not staying on, they came to you because it was your name. They may not stay. So that has to be figured in anybody looking at the value of this. Also, how much of this is upfront cosmetic versus insurance billing? How much is collectible of that? So there are a lot of things that go into evaluation of the value of your practice. And there are a lot of different formulas to derive at value. I think those are the things you talk about with a consultant. Old formulas may not work. What people used to get in the past for a practice, they may not get any longer. So your tangible assets, if you have a surgery center, this isn't mine, but if you had a surgery center, if this is your office, this is another surgeon's office, a beautiful office in Utah. Your equipment, your lasers, some of it may be outmoded. Some of it may need maintenance. Some of it you may not use anymore. So it's not only what you paid for it, but it's after depreciation, what it's worth, and what would it cost to replace that. Do you have an OR? Those are your tangible assets. And the intangible are your goodwill when selling a business. Your charts, how many will stay with them or you? That's another question. And there's a difference in the goodwill if you're going to stay on or if you're not going to stay on and you're leaving and you're just turning over the keys to someone else. The thing you need to do before you start doing it is you need to get your own house in order. You need to make sure your financial records are appropriate, that they're clean, that you have them, somebody can look at them, breakdown of income, and a breakdown of expenditures, annual procedure volume, in comparison with others in your region, and maybe nationally, your management reports, your KPIs, your billing processes, who does that, what's your collection rate. All of those things are important to look at. And, if this is your office, what do you need to do? Is it a fixer-upper? Do you need to do a lot of things before you put it up for either sale or transition so you get maximum value at it? Is it worth repairing to add value before marketing the practice, or is it not? And there's no right or wrong answer to these. You have to answer these things for yourself. So what are your options? And this is a dilemma. And you're scratching your head. What should I do? You can merge practices with another practice in your community. You can close the door and sell the physical assets. You can sell it to an individual practicing in your community. You can sell it to a nearby practice. You can sell it to a group. You can join the group. You can bring on partners who can buy you out, an option. You can sell it to a hospital. Most of the people I've talked to who've sold it to hospitals regret that decision because you're captured. You can't go back to practice. You have nothing to go back to. They suddenly change what your reimbursement is, and you're not in control of anything. You can sell it to a private equity group and still practice. That's one of the things I did, and they've bought other practices. We brought in other surgeons, and not only in this area, but across the country. That's very different from selling to a VC group. I won't say venture capital, I'll say vulture capital, because essentially that's what most of that is. And although that may have worked in other specialties, it historically has not worked in plastic surgery. It's a different time. And I think private equity is interested as long as physicians are running it. I think that the models in orthopedics and ophthalmology in term don't necessarily work for plastic surgery, but it's an option. So financial consultant, you need that because you're going to sell this. Okay, if you get a certain amount of money, what are the tax implications? How do you want that structured? How much do you want structured for goodwill? How much do you want structured future payout? How much do you want in private equity going forward. And so all of those things, you really need a consultant, because I doubt any plastic surgeon I'm talking to out there can give good, solid answers of the best way to do that. And then how do you fit into that puzzle? If you bring in someone, or you're going to sell it, or you're going to stay on, does that really work? Is it a good match? And if you're going to do business with someone else, you have to look their ability, their talent, their attitude, their skills, their know-how, their potential. Remember, everything in life, whether it's personal or business, is about relationships. Is this really going to work? Are you going to be comfortable in it, or are you going to resent it? Do that homework and check that out ahead of time. And what's the brand image that's going to be there? Are you going to be comfortable? Is it very different from the brand that you have? Is it something you're maybe different, but you're going to be happy with? If not, that's not the best option for you. So adding associates, and many do this. Sometimes it works out. You need a structured plan. Are they going to be on salary? Is it going to be revenue sharing? What's going to happen before a partnership? If there is a partnership, what's the buy-in to a partnership? What period of time? Is there a buyout if you want to exit? What are they faced with? Can they afford it? Those are all things you need to look at when you add associates. It's like getting married. You're going to spend a lot of time with those associates. You better make sure you're going to be happy with that. And then what if? What if it doesn't work out? So you need to be flexible. What you think your plan is, it may change as time goes on, or that association didn't work out, or that partner went off on their own. So you need to have several options to be flexible and realize that your ideal may not work out. And remember, the value of money today is different from what it was before, and it's going to continue to change as the economy changes. Before you turn over your keys to somebody, make sure that it's what you want and it's what you're going to be comfortable with, so you're not going to have seller's remorse. And then you can change your card. To retired, ask someone else. No business, no deadlines, no phone, no email. Not my problem. Now, that's not for everybody. A lot of people want to stay involved. I personally wanted to continue to stay in the practice. I wanted to continue because I'm still involved in a lot of task forces in the state, nationally, internationally. And that's important to me. So just walking out into the sunset and just playing tennis or just surfing wasn't the answer. But it's different for everyone. So find what you want to do, but do it early enough that as things change, you can adapt and modify, but have a plan.
That's great, Dr. Singer. Several times a surgeon has brought in an associate, and I've heard that, because I've been at this 22 years, so I've heard quite a bit of what goes on. And the surgeon said he was going to retire and then didn't. And the associate, and he tacks on another 5 years. Like I think mentally you have to know yourself. Are you going to be able to walk away when it's time? Yeah.
I think everybody's different that way. My exit strategy has changed through the years. I keep moving the goalposts. But I know that for me, just totally walking away without some interest, continued in plastic surgery was not the answer for me. And I have a lot of other aspects in my life that are important, but there are also things that develop, like the health of your family, that may change things. I'm blessed with a better 2/3, Judith, my wife, but she's developed some illness, and that changes your plans. The community changes. International situation changes. Your health may change, where you think, I'd like to do these things. My wife's advice was great. Judith says, I never want to look back and say, I wish I had done that. So don't put off doing the things you want to do.
Yeah.
Getting back to associates, I would say by and large, some of those relationships work out that have been well structured ahead of time and everybody knows what they're getting. I would say more than 50% don't work out, either because the expectations were unrealistic. And I think it's like handling patients for surgery. It's managing expectations on both sides. You have to be honest with the person who's coming in, and you have to be honest with yourself. And that should all be laid out ahead of time. Otherwise, it won't work.
I think it's actually higher than the divorce rate, because I don't think you have the mental mindset to hang around with an associate you don't want to be with. I think you have a less tolerance for it. I just haven't seen many that have worked out super well. The ones I think have worked out well are when they have serious boundaries, like one does neck up, the other does neck down. It's really clear who's going to do what. But I just wonder, what is the easiest way to exit profitably? Because I have interviewed a few doctors to find out how they did it. And surprisingly, the plastic surgery part of their practice was not as valuable as their non-surgical predictable revenue stream. And if you start looking at that, that actually makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot more certainty in like the non-surgical med spa services, because the patients weren't really hanging around with you anyway. It's more predictable. And that's actually, quite frankly, why I came up with the KISS Club, the KISS Loyalty Club, because I'm thinking, wait, if the value is not in the plastic surgery, where is it? And right? Like, it really kind of made sense. So a couple of doctors said, I didn't buy the surgical side, I bought the non-surgical side. Isn't that interesting?
It is. And the other aspect of that where it may be valuable is if they've owned the building, or they've owned the office property, and that may be more valuable
for
than
sure
the practice itself. But not everybody's in that situation. And not everybody has a med spa.
But would you recommend, like, somebody getting started or just newer at this to buy some real estate?
I'm not going to be in a position of telling people how to invest their money. Right at this moment, real estate seems like a reasonably good option. It always isn't. The other thing one has to look at, especially if they're starting, is, how much debt do I have? Can I afford more debt? Do I want to compromise my future lifestyle by building a facility and I'm then locked into paying for that? I've had my own surgical facility almost since I started practicing, although I'm on the campus of Scripps Memorial Hospital and I'm involved in the hospital. I can't conceive what it would be like not having the facility. We didn't have to shut down when a lot of elective things at the hospital were shut down. And I'm still on surgery supervisory at the hospital, so I respect what the hospital has to do. But it gives you a lot of freedom to have your own, but it's also very expensive to run. The more personnel you have, I always say, as you increase your staff arithmetically, you increase your aggravation geometrically, and that's getting harder and harder in today's world. If I was starting today, would I build my own facility? Probably not until I had an active, good practice going that was going to pay that overhead. And I would tell you also, if I was just coming out of a residency or fellowship, I wouldn't want to learn on my own dime. I'd learn on somebody else's dime. I'd learn about business by joining somebody, at least initially, to learn the business.
That's a good point. Another thing that has come up, and again, you have to know who you are and what your tolerant level is. So some of the surgeons have sold to a hospital, and I said, how long are you staying? And they said, well, I'm in for 3 years. Now, all of a sudden, overnight, they went from running the whole show to being an employee, and they don't run anything. And that sounds fantastic initially. Like, oh, thank God, I just have to do surgery. I don't have to do the marketing, deal with the staff. But then some of them have had trouble with that and saying, wow, I'm just watching them, crucify my practice. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think most of the physicians I've seen in that situation resent that they made that decision. They can't control the marketing. They can't control the service. They can't control who takes care of the patients. And then the hospital may make a whole different decision, cutting you out of it. You've been the captain of your own ship.
Right.
You're used to doing that, and you give that up. And that's okay. Some people can do that. And there are a number of people, significant percentage of plastic surgeons, who find that emotionally disquieting.
The whole control issue for sure. So what is your situation? Because who did you sell to?
I sold to an MSO, a medical service organization, that had a couple spas and one other office, bought a practice of a very busy plastic surgeon in the community, and then I brought in another surgeon who was very busy, didn't have his own OR, and they were using our joint OR here, and another surgeon. So there are 4 people now who use these 2 ORs, and we have two other individuals in a practice who've just signed a letter of agreement to join Prime. And as I say, we have bought practices in other communities, including on the East Coast and others in Northern California. So it's a different arrangement because although there's a primary financial individual who has been very successful in other ventures, including real estate, his main associate who was involved in the venture was a plastic surgeon. So the decisions are, and I'm theoretically the chief strategy officer. So there are a lot of the things that we bring to the table, having run practices for a long time, that somebody as a venture capital group wouldn't know, because they would do it not from the point of view of service of the patient and what's best in a practice. So I think it requires the combination of both. That's why most practices that have just sold to venture capital have not worked out, because they have a total different model. It's only about the bottom line. It's not about taking care of the patient. So I think you need to look at that. There's some people that are happy with that. I'm not saying what's right or wrong. You have to look inside yourself and say, okay, what am I going to be comfortable with? What am I not going to be comfortable with?
Mm-hmm. And now, are you still practicing within this new arrangement?
Yeah, I'm not doing another facelift till tomorrow morning. Yeah, I'm practicing within that. And, as I say, I'm still very involved in the organizations and lecturing, and also in training staff as they come in, as we've needed more staff, of what we expect, what is the brand, what's the image, because you're only as good as your staff. I'll say it again. You're only as good as your staff. And they have to reflect what your image of the branding is. Whether you join a group and you're going to have multiple offices, you need to have some consistency of that brand. If that brand isn't comfortable for you, you don't belong there.
Right. Talking about staff, what does happen when you decide to exit? Is it typical to agree, or in your negotiations, keep the staff there, or just let everyone go and give them a severance? Any thoughts on that?
I think there are multiple different ways to do that. An attorney is best for that. If you have, for example, a C Corp and you want to shut that down into something, to an S Corp or something else, you may want to terminate employment with the idea that they will be hired by the new entity, because they're not buying your liabilities. They're buying your assets. And so there are all ways to structure that, but you need to look carefully, and you have to have a full understanding. If you're going to sell it, what are they buying, what they're not buying, what are the arrangements for the staff? Are they going to keep them all? Are they going to let some of them go? But those are all the type of things you need to negotiate ahead of time.
Well, just overall, just the years of experience I've had, anecdotally, your practice is never worth as much as you think it is. There's just two very different numbers. The number you think it is, and then the number the other party thinks it should be.
I think that's very true. And what goodwill and what practices used to sell for,
Right.
it's different today. It's a different world, it's a different economy. As you know, I lecture a lot about practice management.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I talk about is, you're doing piecework as a plastic surgeon, and you're a glorified tailor in some ways. So don't get carried away. You're not a rock star. And once you start believing your own PR, you're going to be in trouble. So don't believe that, because you're not going to be worth what you think you are.
That's a really good point. Yeah. All right. Well, if somebody was to have a question for you, I'm afraid to give them your information because I don't want you to get bombarded. But if they did have a question for you or want to talk to you, how would they reach out to you?
They can contact me through the office, and they call the La Jolla Prime office, and that's 858-455-5214. And I can tell them, here are the people that I used that worked well. And here are some other options for you. But, as I say, don't wait until your last 6 months when you want to walk away, or your last year, or even your last 2 years. No matter what level you are at, start thinking about it now. You may want to alter it as you go along. You may not do that, but at least you've thought about, what am I going to do down the road?
Please think about it 10 years before you're even considering exiting, because it takes a minute to figure all this out and to build up your assets and get your money straight, get your accounting straight, get your legal straight, get your processes and systems in order. It's a much bigger deal than you realize. So if anything, I would, even if you were thinking about retiring in 10 years, I would at least have a consultant come in and just take a look, like right now, or study it, go online, Google it, how much is a practice worth, and find out what is valuable to somebody else, because it might not be, as valuable to them as it was to you. Okay, I think that's it. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Singer. Thank you so, so much. And everybody, if you got a lot out of this, please head over to iTunes and give us a good review so we can share this with other surgeons and get a better reach. And if you've got any questions for me, you can certainly leave them on my website at CatherineMaley.com, or you can DM me at Instagram at CatherineMaleyMBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.